The application comes with a set of predefined configuration parameters. A configuration panel is provided to allow users to change the value of some of those parameters and adapt them to the user's taste. To open the configuration panel window, click on the gear icon on the toolbar. The configuration panel window will appear. The panel is divided into 5 categories, which are spacing, granularity, formats, colors, and display. Spacing is the horizontal and vertical space between records. Hence 2 variables are provided to configure that spacing, one for the horizontal spacing and one for the vertical spacing. Modifying the value of these variables will increase or decrease the horizontal and/or vertical space between records. That will allow you to increase or decrease the density of the records on your display view. Granularity defines the date unit used on the axis of time, that is, the length of time between 2 ticks on the axis of time. Granularities from 1 day up to 1,000 years are supported. An auto option is also provided where you leave it to the application to determine the best granularity to use. Increasing the granularity, for example from year to month, will decrease the length of the time unit used on the axis of time. Conversely, decreasing the granularity will increase that length of the time. The selected granularity could have a significant impact on the performance of the application. When the granularity is increased, the algorithm used to determine the location of a record on the display view will have to work with an increased number of possibilities. For example, more compute and memory will be required when the selected granularity of a timeline is set to days versus when it is set to year. Based on the time length of the visible records, that is the difference between the end date of the latest visible record and the start date of the earliest visible record, the application might limit the granularity options available to select from. For example, if the time length of a timeline stretches over 300 years, the application will disable and not permit granularities of 1 day or 1 week and will set the minimum granularity to 1 month. This is mostly to ensure that the performance of the application and its resource consumption remains within reasonable limits. The selected granularity also impact the density of the records on the display view. For example, a granularity of 1 year will result in timeline that is less spread horizontally but more vertically than the same timeline with a granularity of 1 day. The date format defines the format used on the display window to display the dates associated with the records and axis of time. By default, the application is configured to use the North American format, that is, month then day then year. A user can change that format to use the European and international format, that is day then month then year. A year then month then day format is also provided so all possible options can be offered. Note that the Gregorian calendar is the only calendar supported by the application. With the font size dropdown, you can set the size of the font to use when displaying the records. The font size can be set to any value to between 8 and 15 points. By default, the font size is set to 10 points. Note that the font style and size used with the rest of the application's views and windows are dependent on the system font selected on your device. Only the record's display font is impacted by this variable. The background coloring panel allows you to change and set the background color of the display window. By default, the background color is set to white. The axis of time coloring panel allows you to change and set the color of the axis of time on the display window. For both panels, the application uses the standard color wheel provided by Apple on your device. Note that the color of the record's font and its background are set for each record when the record is created or edited in the record management window. In addition to the axe color, you can also set the line thickness of the axe. By default, the thickness of the line is set to 1 point, but it can be increased up to 3 points. You can also set the position of the axe of time. By default, the axe is displayed at the bottom of the display window. When you scroll the display window vertically, the axe will not be visible anymore. You can keep the axe always visible at the bottom of the display window by checking the floating position checkbox. Alternatively, you can select to have the axe always displayed in the middle of the display window. The first two parameters are used to configure the drop lines. The display checkbox is used to determine whether the application will display lines that drop vertically from the beginning of the record title down to the axe of time. Those lines can help identify the time sequence of the records in a dense timeline. The thickness dropdown set the thickness of that drop line. By default, a 1-point thickness is used, but that value can be increased up to 3 points. The next three attributes might be difficult to understand if you are new to the application. They are more advanced setting which use will become clearer as your timeline becomes more complex and start integrating some of the advanced features such as heading, levels and hierarchy. Level sorting determines whether the records should be sorted and displayed using an ascending order of their level value or a descending order. In the example displayed, record 1 and 3 are configured with a level value of 30, while record 2 is set with a level value of 35. When the ascending sorting is used, the records are displayed from the lowest level value to the highest one, starting from the bottom of the screen. Hence record 1 and 3 are displayed closest to the bottom. Conversely, when the descending sorting is used, the records are displayed from the highest level value to the lowest starting from the bottom of the screen. In this case, record 2 is the one closest to the bottom. Which order to use is a question of taste. The headings section is used to determine whether the application will display all the headings records that were returned by the active filters or only the heading records with children records. When the Show All Heading checkbox is selected, all the headings records that satisfy the active filter are displayed regardless of whether they have children records that satisfy the active filter or not. When the Show All Heading checkbox is not selected, only the heading records with children records that satisfy the active filter are displayed. In our example we have two heading records, one in red with the title Heading with No Children and the other in blue with the title Heading with Children. The latter has two children records, Child 1 and Child 2. When the Show All Heading is activated, the heading in red is displayed although it has no children records. Conversely, if the Show All Heading is deactivated, that heading in red is now not displayed. The Show All Heading should typically be unselected when viewing a timeline. This option will ensure that the heading records with no children are not taking valuable screen space. However, when editing a timeline, the Show All Heading should be selected. This will display all the heading records, which will allow the addition of children records under any desired heading. Finally, the parent field determines whether the parents of the returned filtered records should be displayed regardless of whether those parents satisfy the criteria of the active filters or not. When the Show All Parents checkbox is not selected, then only those records that satisfy the active filter will be displayed. When the Show All Parents checkbox is selected, then the application will display the records that matches the active filter as well as any of their parents' records even if those records do not satisfy the activated filter. In our example, Child 1 and Child 2 are tagged with Tag 1 but not their parent record, the heading record Heading with Children. So when a filter is activated to show only the records with Tag 1, if the Show All Parent checkbox is activated, the heading record is displayed even though it is not tagged with Tag 1. Conversely, if that checkbox is not activated, then that heading record is not displayed. In general, it is recommended that you keep the Show All Parent activated as it will display the whole hierarchy of records regardless of the result of the filter. You can deactivate it if you are interested in seeing only the records that satisfy the active filter.